Hi y'all, welcome back to Alethea Cakes channel, where we give you some cake tips and tutorials. In today's video, I am going to share with you the top 10 best ever cake baking tips that will enable you to have a perfect cake over and over again. Stay tuned to the end because I'll give you a bonus tip that will take your cakes to the next level. So before you start making any cakes at all, tip number 1, read the full recipe. Make sure that you've read the whole recipe and see what it requires you to do, because there might be some ingredients that need chopping or mixing or preparing separately before you put everything together. Tip number 2, have all of your ingredients ready. So after you've studied your cake recipe, make sure that you've measured all of your ingredients and you've got them set up in some bowls ready for you to use. For eggs, butter or margarine, these need to be at room temperature. So what I usually do is I take them out of the fridge, say at least 1 hour before prepping my cake to bring them to room temperature. If your recipe calls for milk, what I suggest you do is you put the milk in the microwave, say for at least a few seconds to bring it to room temperature. But remember to always check the expiry dates of all of your ingredients. Tip number 3, always preheat your oven to the right temperature before you place your cake batter in. It's best to use an oven thermometer to check the temperature of your oven. In terms of how long an oven takes to heat up, it depends on your oven. You will need to do a test run to see how long it takes. This will be helpful because it will save you loads of energy consumption, especially if the recipe takes you long to prepare. Tip number 4, line your cake pan before mixing your ingredients. First of all, you grease your cake pan with butter or margarine. You then take some grease-proof paper, cut it up according to the size of the cake pan, and then place it within the cake pan. If you are making a 10-inch plus cake, you will need to grease a flour nail and then place it in the middle of the lined cake pan. For cupcakes, simply put your cupcake cases inside your cupcake tin. There's no need to grease the holes. By the way, to find out where to get the tools mentioned in this video, check out the link in our description below. Tip number 5, cream your butter and sugar until light and fluffy. If your recipe calls for creaming your butter or margarine together with sugar, you need to do this until the cream becomes light and fluffy or airy. You will tell when it's done because the cream is going to change color to a pale yellow. Basically, what is happening is you're using the sugar to create fine air bubbles within the butter or margarine, and this results in a cake that is lighter in texture and has a crumb that is finer. That is a great tip. Do you agree? If you do, please leave us a comment below and also a like. And if you're finding this video useful, please do click on the subscribe and the bell buttons below in order to get more notifications for our next cake tips and tutorials. So a quick rundown of what we've covered so far. Read the full recipe, have your ingredients ready, always preheat your oven to the right temperature, line your cake pan before mixing your ingredients, and then cream your butter and sugar until light and fluffy. On this note, if you are into cakes already, what else do you do to make your cakes lighter and fluffier? Please let us know in the comments below. Now on to the rest of the tips plus the bonus tip at the end. Tip number 6, add eggs one by one. When using eggs within your batter, mix them in one by one and beat for at least 20 seconds in between. This introduces more air within your cake batter, resulting in a nice and fluffy cake. Tip number 7, don't overmix the cake batter. If you do, you get a cake that is dense and chewy in texture. When folding in the flour, only mix until just combined. That is the golden rule. This is the point where I always recommend a stand mixer over a hand mixer. My preference is the Kenwood K-Mix stand mixer, which has a fold option that folds the flour in gently and perfectly. Details on where to get this mixer are also included in the link in our description below. Tip number 8, don't overbake your cake. Only bake a cake until the cake tester comes out clean. If the recipe states that the oven baking time for a cake is say 45 minutes, I would recommend that you start checking your cake say 5 minutes before the recommended time. If the cake is not done yet, then close the oven door and check again say after 5 minutes. And keep doing that until the cake is done. Tip number 9, cool the cake completely. When the cake is out of the oven, unless the recipe says otherwise, cool the cake in the tin for 10 minutes. This helps the cake to firm up and prevents soggy edges. When the 10 minutes is up, take the cake out of the tin and leave it on a cooling rack to cool completely. Tip number 10, store your cakes properly. Once your cake has cooled completely, wrap it in several layers of cling film to maintain freshness before you decorate it. You then place it in a cool, dry place unless your recipe says otherwise. You can also put it in a plastic container after it's been wrapped. Now the rules are different if you've made a rich fruit cake. Fruit cakes need to be wrapped in grease-proof paper and should never be placed in plastic containers. This would cause molds to develop over time. So a recap of what we've covered. Read the full recipe, have your ingredients ready, always preheat your oven to the right temperature, line your cake pan before mixing your ingredients, cream your butter and sugar until light and fluffy, add eggs one by one, don't overmix your cake batter, don't overbake your cake, cool the cake completely, and finally store your cake properly. Now here comes the bonus tip. Always try to use good quality ingredients if you can within your cake to have a great and tasty end product that your family, friends, or customers will keep coming back for. On this note, a new video will be coming out that will show you how to make a simple vanilla cake. I suggest that you click on the subscribe and the bell buttons below to get notified when it's out. In the meantime, please do check out our easy, hassle-free chocolate cake recipe that requires no mixer, no rakes. Have a great day. God bless.